April 26, 1986. It's a date that's burned into history. And for a lot of us, our picture of what happened comes from that incredible HBO series Chernobyl. It was gripping, it was horrifying, and it felt so real. But today, we're going to peel back the curtain on the drama. Think of this as a historical investigation. We're going to dig into that powerful story and try to answer a really important question. How much of what absolutely captivated us on screen was the real, unvarnished truth, and how much was a little bit of Hollywood magic? So, here's how we're going to crack this case. We'll look at some of the most unforgettable moments from the show. We'll start with that chilling legend of the Bridge of Death. Then we'll dive into the mission of the divers, uncover some of the actual life-or-death moments, and then, at the end, talk about what the real legacy of truth is. Okay, let's jump right in with our first file. This is one of the most haunting images from the entire series, the story of the people who supposedly gathered on a bridge to watch the disaster unfold. I mean, you remember the scene, right? It's just bone-chilling. You see these families, kids and all, just standing there, completely mesmerized by this eerie, beautiful glow in the sky. They have no idea what it is, but we do. We know they're standing in a shower of deadly radiation. It's an absolutely unforgettable moment. But here's the thing. When you look at the historical record, the story gets a little fuzzy. While, yeah, it's possible a few people might have seen the fire from far away, there's just no real evidence of a big crowd gathering on that bridge. The whole story, that everyone who stood there died, seems to be more of an urban legend. A really powerful one for sure, but one that was likely exaggerated for the show. All right, let's move on to our next case file. This one is another huge moment from the show. The story of 3 incredibly brave men who went on what looked like a straight-up suicide mission deep beneath the reactor. The way the series tells it, this is just pure heart-in-your-throat heroism. You have these 3 men, Ananenko, Bezpalov, and Baranov, volunteering for a job that everyone, and I mean everyone, thinks is a death sentence. They're wading through this pitch-black, highly radioactive water to open a valve and stop a second, even bigger explosion. The show basically tells us they gave their lives. But check this out. The real story completely flips that script. Now, don't get me wrong, what they did was unbelievably dangerous and heroic, but it wasn't a suicide mission. All 3 of them survived. Baranov died many years later in 2005 from a heart attack, but the other 2, Ananenko and Bezpalov, lived for decades after that day. So their courage was 100% real, but their fate was very different from what we saw on screen. So while the show definitely ramped up the drama in some places, the strange thing is, the plain, unvarnished truth of Chernobyl has moments that are in some ways even more terrifying. Let's just quickly look at the helicopter crash. In the series, a helicopter flies right into the radioactive plume and just falls out of the sky. A dramatic, shocking moment. In reality, a helicopter did crash, but it was 6 months later, in October, and it wasn't because of radiation. Its blades hit the cable of a crane. It was a horrible accident, but the cause was mechanical, not a mysterious radioactive force. And this is where we get to the real mind-boggling human cost of the disaster. The show focused on a handful of key people, but the true story of sacrifice belongs to a massive group of people known simply as the liquidators. 600,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's how many soldiers, miners, firefighters, and even regular citizens were brought in to try and contain this nightmare. They were the cleanup crew for an impossible mess. And the work they did was just unimaginable. On the roof of the reactor, the radiation was so high that the fancy West German robots they brought in just fried. So they used what they called bio-robots. Men. These guys were given just 90 seconds. 90 seconds to run out onto the most dangerous place on Earth, throw a couple of shovels of radioactive graphite off the roof, and run back. That was the reality on the front lines. So, after separating the Hollywood version from the historical facts, what are we left with? What's the real legacy here? It really boils down to this. At its heart, Chernobyl was a tragedy, caused by mistakes, by carelessness, and by a government that tried to hide the truth. But the response was a story of human sacrifice on a scale that's hard to even comprehend. The real heroism doesn't need any dramatic embellishment. And this changes how we should think about the word hero in this story. The real heroes weren't just a few main characters. They were the 600,000 liquidators facing an invisible enemy, doing their job day after day. Many of them would get sick, suffer from cancer, and die years later because of the work they did. That's the true sacrifice. So, when we learn that the Bridge of Death is a legend or that the divers actually survived, it doesn't make the disaster any less tragic. Not at all. What it does is it helps us focus our respect and our attention where it truly belongs, on the incredible, real-world sacrifice of those hundreds of thousands of people. And that brings us to one last big question. When we tell these stories from our past, what's more important? A captivating story that makes us feel the weight of what happened, or the painful, sometimes messy, and often less cinematic truth? It's definitely something worth thinking about.